Well, friends, happy Sunday. Beloved wonder, center of the universe. You traveled 14 billion years to get here. Welcome. Let us offer a word of prayer and gratitude for shalom. Eternal now, make of us a single garment of destiny and send a word. Amen. Beginning this week, the good people of the Fountain Street Church will begin piling up wood for the winter. And I suspect we'll need, one to two cord per 1,000 square feet, what they say. So as our historic home is only roughly 50,000 square feet, give or take, it's probably need around 70 or 80 cord of lumber. That ought to do it. Maybe 90, just in case we have a cold snap in April. So I think about this a lot. I heat my house with wood. And most people who don't, when they think about heating your house with wood, they imagine like an old potbelly stove over in the corner of the living room, putting little sticks in there and things like that. Our wood stove is not like that. It lives out in the yard. It looks like a big metal shed with a chimney on top. A lot of folks, especially around here, they mistake it for a smokehouse. It produces a lot of smoke. It'll burn about a cubic yard of wood at a time, and it heats about 1,000 gallons of water. And I pump that water through the ground and it circulates around inside my furnace stack, and then it heats up my whole house. And when the night is long and dark and cold and that fire gets low, I don't have the luxury of putting on my slippers and descending the stairs and tossing a few splits of white oak into a little potbelly stove in the corner. Now, if the fire is low at night, I get to put on my overalls and gloves and my hat. I clip on a headlamp, and then I trek out into the darkness out back. I make my way through the snow drifts until I reach that furnace, and then I get to work. And my wood furnace doesn't burn lovely little splits of white oak. I mean, it can, but my boiler was built to burn anything that burns. You could shove an old couch in there if you want to. So we burn, around here in the Midwest, they call it boiler wood. And that's just a broad term that refers to anything Nathan was able to cut down this year into rounds that'll fit through the door and can be lifted by a single adult human. So the older I get, that's smaller the wood gets. These days it's mostly white ash and black cherry, and these days. And I'll need between 5 and 6 cords of lumber to get through the winter without having to avail myself of the use of too much demon electricity and having to fork any money over to that villainous power company. Michiganders know how to prepare for the winter. I am a 7th generation West Michigander. My children are the 8th generation of our people that have lived here in this part of the state. Midwesterners are the ant, not the grasshopper. And so this week, starting this week and up until middle of November, all of you will get asked, you will all get asked about how much wood you can help us stack up for the coming season. And this is what the pledge card is. That's all it is. It's a request for you to tell us how much lumber you think you can add to the pile. You say, maybe half a cord, maybe a face cord, I don't know. Then we all bring our pledge cards in, and we can sit down with a pencil and a calculator, and we can figure out the kind of year that we're going to have together in 2025. But you are, as an organization, in a little bit of an interesting situation today now, because you are in the interim. Fountain Street Church has chosen to embark on a 2-year journey to sort out who it wants to be for the next 20 years. This is important. It's important because in many churches, in many seasons, the pledge card, this thing, the stewardship campaign, or whatever you want to call it, the annual appeal, well, some folks might use it as a referendum, maybe on the performance of the pastor. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't happen as much in churches that have good systems for performance reviews for their pastor. And it doesn't happen as much when the minister is responsive to the people. And it doesn't happen as much in churches that have a good and strong oversight committee. It tends to happen more often in churches where there's a gap between the minister and the people. And that has happened here in the past, in your past. I've worked with these churches in my career, and I've served as a consultant in these churches where there is that gap, and the circumstances can become dire. And so pledge campaigns can be fraught. Who's going to do it? Who wants to do it? Nobody wants to do it. Who's going to ask these people for their pledges? How are we going to do it? How much are we going to ask for? I don't know. Now, as I am your interim minister, my job is to tell you the truth, sometimes unvarnished. And I can do this. It's in my contract. If this wasn't a church, if this was a secular nonprofit organization, maybe a collective or something, then it would be much easier. You would just pay a membership fee to participate and support this organization. Now, I don't know what you'd base the fee on. I do know how much it costs us to hold a worship service at 11 a.m. on Sunday morning. I know how much that costs down to the penny. If this was the Grand Rapids Civic Theater, I'm pointing in the wrong direction. Sorry. I'm not a geographer. If this was the Civic Theater, we would use that number to set the ticket price to attend the show. And then we'd probably have discounted shows on Wednesdays or something. Maybe scholarship tickets to the worship for students and kids, maybe. If this were a nonprofit, we might just take the cost of the proposed budget and divide it by the number of members, and then that would be the rate. And that works out here to something about $3,000 per year per member. And we would have that subsidized by any grants that we might write and receive, and then also, of course, offset by the projected annual return on any endowments, a number of other factors. And also, this is not unknown to houses of faith. In many Reformed Jewish synagogues, people pay dues. And your membership dues are what you pay to be a member of the temple. And different synagogues do it in different ways, especially today. Some of them have a tiered system that's based on the size of your family. And then for some of them, it's just a flat fee. Everybody pays the same. And in many of these settings also, if you can't afford the membership dues, then you go and you talk to the rabbi, and there's a scholarship program or something. And again, to figure out the dues for membership, it's not too complicated. You take the cost of the operation of the synagogue for a year, you divide that by the number of member families, and that's your number. And of course, if more families join, or if families bring other families to join, then that cost goes down. In Unitarian Universalist churches, it's all over the map these days, how they figure out their budgets. And then in most Christian churches, in most Reformed or Protestant Christian churches, and at Fountain Street Church historically, we ask people simply to make a voluntary pledge. But how are we supposed to know how much to pledge? It's a little bit like trying to figure out how much wood you need to put by for the winter. What I do, and what we've done before in my family, is we sit down and then we figure out what 10% of our income is for the year, that 10%. And then we divide that up among the charities and organizations and projects that are most important to us. A portion of that goes into maybe an end-of-life gift to continue our giving after we're worm food. Well, why 10%? Why? And how much of that 10% should go to the Fountain Street Church? 10% is just kind of an arbitrary number for a lot of reasons. Now, if you go into a Christian church today, they'll have a real good explanation for that. They'll use the word tithe, and they'll talk about their tithes and offerings. Who's heard tithes and offerings before in a church? Yeah. Your tithe, it's just a word that means 1/10. That's what you give to God, right? And then your offerings are anything that you bring on top of that 10%. And they get this tithing business from the Old Testament, from the book of Leviticus. It's one of those places where the Christian churches seem to prefer the letter of the law in the Old Testament. And they kind of quietly ignore the stuff in the New Testament when they do that. I'm going to get in trouble, aren't I? All right, that's fine. Well, no, they do with the tithe, because in the New Testament, in the Gospels, and then in the book of Acts, the church does not ask the members to give 10%. It doesn't. Do you know what the book of Acts has the members donate to the church as a portion of their income? 100%. That's what it says. From Acts chapter 2, all the believers were together and held everything in common. They sold their property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. The New Testament doesn't ask for 10%. It asks for 100%. And then the church gives you back what they think you need. That's communism. That's not going to fly these days, these churches. So they keep going back. Keep going back. Oh, Leviticus, 10%. Okay, we can make that work. That'll work. That's where that comes from. And so they go back to the tithe from Leviticus. It says to take the first 1/10 of everything that the land produces and bring it into the storehouse, and then we'll go from there. Okay. But 10% as a starting figure is also, it's historically the way in which early American communities would establish their social safety nets before the welfare state existed. For John Wesley, he felt that living within at least 90% of your means was a protection against debt, which was something that Americans historically avoided fastidiously. If you determine that your goal is to give at least 10% of your income away to charity, and then when there's a crisis in your life or a natural disaster, or you get injured or something, then you can be absolved of that responsibility, and then you receive that charity instead of providing it. You will then return to the tithe when God has made you whole again. That's what they would say. And in any case, John Wesley believed that he understood that his own obsession with material wealth was an illusion. John Wesley lived very, very fastidiously, very conservatively. But he knew, in the words of Professor Jim Morrison, none of us are getting out of here alive. So anything that he could invest in the future of the beautiful project that he was involved in, it would be passed on to the next generation, because he knew he couldn't hold on to it even if he wanted to. But Americans today don't live within 90% of their means. At least 70% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Many Americans live far beyond their means. They're leveraged out over the chasm of debt. In other words, they can't even think about putting up wood for the winter because they're burning lumber as quickly as they can cut it down. And that's why we say, maybe, just make 10% your goal and then work toward it. And that's the best I've got for you. But if you want my advice on how much you should pledge to your church, my advice is to sit down together with a pencil and paper and write down a number that's about 10% of your income, and then write down the names of the charities and efforts and projects and things that you want to support, and make a list and figure out how much each of them is actually worth to you. If you want to go from the other direction, you could think about what it would cost you if those places didn't exist or if they weren't in your life. Either way is fine. But as your interim minister, the thing that is most important to me is that you think about this seriously. You take it seriously. This year, as we build the budget for 2025, it's all going to be done extremely intentionally, and it is going to be hidebound to your pledges. I'm not here amongst the good people of Fountain Street Church to sell you a shiny new car based on hopes and dreams. I'm not going to leave in my wake an unsustainable budget propped up on hope for your next senior minister to inherit. The 2025 budget for this church will be honest and clear and transparent. And the outlay of activities of this congregation for the year to come will be based on these pledges. Now, I've said here too, for the years to come. But this is more than anything else. I think this is my answer these days, more than anything else, to the question I get a lot, which is, who is this church for? It's too easy to just respond, it's for everyone. Yeah, everybody says that. Everyone. Is Fountain Street Church here for everyone? I don't know about that. I'm working on that. We're working on that. But I do have a relatively good and meaningful answer to this question, and it's one I want you to think about when you consider your pledge. And the answer is the same to any question. In 50 years' time from today, will there be people who need Fountain Street Church? 50 years from now, will there be people in Grand Rapids who need Fountain Street Church? A century ago, 100 years ago, when this place was built, this specific sanctuary, the people who gathered here in this space answered emphatically, yes, yes. And there were times in the life of this church, most notably in the late 1930s and early 1940s, when the people who gathered, the size of the population of this church was smaller, significantly smaller than it is today. And yet they said yes. A century ago, 100 years ago, those people didn't know us with good reason. We didn't exist. We hadn't been born yet. But they had faith. They had faith that in a century hence, there would be people that needed this place. Likewise, those who gathered here 50 years ago. Now, 50 years ago, so this is here, they were listening to the tremendous words of a different preacher. They were listening to Duncan Littlefair and Bev Howerton making music. And they were deciding all on their own that in 50 years, there would be people that needed this place. And so my answer to the question as who we are for, it's often is not, we're here for the generations who have yet to come. We owe them something, I think, a debt, because it was something that was given to us. It's on us to pay it forward. And so we are bound to the demands of intergenerational justice. It's the work we do. This pledge card can be a promise to them. We pledge to plant trees beneath whose shadows we may never sit. The interim time is a time for light, but it's also a time for dreaming about futures to come. And we can't do this work without your input, without your pledge. So I hope that you understand it may be more important this year than at any time in the last 25 years that you turn in your pledge somehow to us, even if you must fill it out with a pledge of $0. That's okay. Or a note that says, this year I cannot part with my treasures, only my talents. I make a pledge of time. Or, this year I want to wait a bit. Keep my powder dry. Okay, that's fine. But we need an accurate and an honest budget. It's not because we're in financial trouble. Let me make that as clear as I possibly can. And it's not because you aren't giving enough. You are doing pretty good based on my metrics. We need it because I have a bounden duty to this congregation to put on paper and in honest terms the information into a church profile that your search committee will be able to use to search for a settled pastor. And I need your next settled minister to know exactly how much wood they can expect to see stacked up out that window when winter comes. So I need your honesty. This is your year when your pledges reflect your values. There are a couple of ways to come at this. I'm going to tell you my hope. I'll close then with my hope. Here we go. I do believe that Fountain Street Church is a very special place. I believe it is a light for wanderers set upon a hill. From our first reading that Chip shared with us from Dorothy Day, if we love enough, we are going to light that fire in the hearts of others. I think Fountain Street Church values the love of other human beings above just about everything else. This is your centennial celebration book, 100th celebration. This was one attempt among many to distill your values into rude language. This is from 1969, is in this one. And it's filled with wonderful stuff. It's cool. I'll put it out there so you can see. There's a big picture of Duncan is in here. It says, an impossible church. Only an impossible minister could serve an impossible church. I think that's good. That's right. But and there's a whole 2-page about Bev. I love that too. That's great. But in here is an affirmation. Affirmation was the strongest word that they were willing to use when it came to the question of what we believe. Can I tell you what they affirmed in 1969? And it says, love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God. That first line, their love is the doctrine of this church. God, I wish I could put that in all of your pockets. Love is the doctrine of this church. As Dorothy says, if we love enough, we're going to light that fire in the hearts of others. So if your pledge is anything, it could be an indication of your love. I hope that you love recklessly. The world needs it today. It does. Maybe more than ever. The ancient reading that Meredith said, it's a teaching from Prophet Jesus. A lamp is not brought in to be put under a grain basket or tucked under a bed. A light is brought in to be put up on the lampstand. He liked parables. When you bring your pledge in for this year, you're bringing your light into this place. It's not going to be hidden away under a bushel basket. It'll shine brightly out into the city, I think, and beyond. The wood that we stack up to heat this place, it doesn't just warm the people in this room. Last month, September, we had over 15,000 visitors here. Some of them, I know for a fact, some of them are here today right now. Some of them found something here they never thought they would find in their whole lives. Your light shines out into a city where I think many people are urgently looking for it. Urgently because so many people are desperate for a church. They've been told over and over and over again by other churches that there is no church for them and that there will never be a church for them. And some of them have taken that to heart. They're going to be brokenhearted until the day they die because they got all the way from one end of this journey to the other believing that they would never have a church home. Many of you here today know that that is an avoidable tragedy. When you can pledge and respond to these people and say, no, those jerks were wrong. There is a church for you. And your pledge is also an investment in ensuring that such a place as this will remain here steadfast for another 150 years. At the end of this interim period, I'm going to write up my final reports, and part of that will include a financial profile of the church. It will be crystal clear and accurate and honest, because I have that responsibility to the next minister of this church. And we've got 2 years together to figure out what it's going to look like. And my hope and suspicion and anticipation is that the light you'll bring into this place will shine so brightly that, oh, Pritton, you'll overwhelm me. And all of us, I hope. And sometime, let me just say this, sometimes in the winter when the house gets cold, and I pull on my boots and my overcoat and I got to go out and put wood in the furnace, I trek out to the furnace, I'm going to throw a few more logs into the fire. What happens is I pull the iron bar on that furnace door and I swing open that door, and you know what happens? God, that fire just leaps back to life. Then it blows me backwards and singes my eyebrows. Because the furnace didn't actually need more wood, it needed more oxygen. Yeah. That's an overwhelming light. I believe that in many ways, Fountain Street Church doesn't need lumber as much as it needs a little bit better airflow. But without these pledges, we can't build a wood pile together, and I can't crouch down in snow. And I can do it. I can blow on the kindling all day long and get it as hot and bright as I want. It's not going to make a lick of difference if there isn't a stack of cordwood behind me to keep it going. Let the light of your love shine. Your financial pledges to this church are important. They'll build us up a fire that can be seen from here all the way south to Plainwell and Hastings, east over to Ionia and Belding, and north up to Newaygo, and west out to Allendale and Hudsonville. Lord knows they need it. Right? So do it. Build up an overwhelming light, church. Be fueled by your generosity. Ready to let love be the only doctrine of this church. Ready to let love be the only doctrine of this church. There's a word for that in Hebrew, you know? Shalom. Shalom. Peace. Thus do we covenant with each other and with the generations that will come after us. Amen. Amen.